Welcome to the MLB slate breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11, breaking down the big Tuesday slate here. Some nice GPPs going on. You have that big $1 million sweet spot, $20 entry there on DK, 150 grand the first. So go ahead and grab yourself some action in that one. And we got ourselves a nice Coors slate tonight. So lots going on. Tons of electric arms going. Corey Kluber, Jose Fernandez, Noah Syndergaard. So gonna be a pretty fun slate. And jumping right into things, 7:05 Braves Nationals. You're looking at really Gio Gonzalez kind of limiting the Atlanta Braves offense for me. I'm not really taking any shots there. It's a pretty low over/under 7.5. But on the other side, I mean, you're looking at Julius Chachin pitching for Atlanta, going up against some of the Washington lefties, Bryce Harper, Daniel Murphy. Kind of the only two on my radar and the only two really doing anything to start the season so far. So I know some of the Nationals righties got some hits last night, but overall they've been pretty bad to start the season. On a full slate, they're kind of off my radar. I'm not expecting a ton of offense from this game. I really think you can look at mostly Michael Taylor leading off again as one of the dirt value plays. 3,500 on DK and still 2,200 on FanDuel. So, I mean, that opens up a ton of spots for playing some Coors bats as well as kind of mix and match with those top pitchers. So, Taylor, solid value play tonight. Bryce Harper, obviously a top option. I think he's going to be a nice swerve from some of the big popular names out there. And then looking at Daniel Murphy, solid second baseman, third base spot there, depending on what site you're on. So, really targeting those guys from that game. As far as the Padres and Phillies side of things go, over-under of 8, so it's looking like there are some spots where maybe there are some runs. I think you can look at the Philly side more so. I think Cesar Hernandez, a dirt cheap second baseman there on DraftKings at $3,000, is in play for me for value. He's a little more expensive on – oh, sorry, no, never mind. 2,300 on FanDuel, so he's pretty cheap everywhere. So definitely looking at him. Maikel Franco, he's the other name that I'm taking a look at in GPPs. Not too badly priced, just 4,100 on DK, and he's fairly cheap on FanDuel as well at 3,300. So really looking at that matchup for those two to do some damage. As far as the Padres side of things, I'm not looking for a ton. It kind of depends on who's in their lineup and where. You're looking at Charlie Morton. He did give up a 384 WOBA to lefties last season. John Jay is leading off. He's a kind of a guy to look at who's interesting. Corey Spangenberg is another one. Outside of that, I'm not looking at too many guys. Morton keeps the ball on the ground. He keeps the ball in the yard at times, most of the time, especially against right-handers. So I'll be probably staying away for the most part. Obviously, they're two bad offenses. I know they're two bad pitchers as well, but still, not a game I'm really pulling an eye on. So moving on to the next one, you got the Blue Jays and the Yankees. That's in the Rogers Center. Over/under of 8, Aaron Sanchez, Masahiro Tanaka. Tanaka, he's kind of a tough guy to pick on, really. I mean, you look at all those right-handed bats in that lineup. He allowed just a 280 WOBA to right-handers. I mean, he did struggle with the long ball at times. 1.34 home runs per 9 to right-handed bats last season. So it is interesting. He does have a poor ground ball rate, but he does have a pretty electric stuff as far as strikeout goes, as far as swing and miss stuff goes. So I won't be picking on him too often, but I think they are interesting plays tonight. Just because you're looking at Manny Machado being popular, Nolan Arenado being popular. Donaldson kind of sitting right in the middle of those guys, so it's kind of an interesting pivot there. But one, I won't have too many shares. It'll just be maybe if I'm making tons of multiple lineups that maybe one or two guys like Bautista and Donaldson find their way in. So don't get crazy. As far as the other side goes, you're looking at Aaron Sanchez coming off a really solid start against the Rays there. He did struggle with left-handed bats last season, although he kept the Rays at bats at bay there. So allowed a 380 WOBA, 1.8 home runs per 9. Did have a solid ground ball rate, but also the strikeout rate went way down against right-handers. or left-handers there. There are some bats in that Yankees lineup like Teixeira, like McCann, Gardner that really intrigue me in tournaments, especially. I think Ellsbury is a nice play as well. So I think that could be an interesting stack on tonight's slate that could go a little bit under-owned. You definitely have the Rogers Center giving a big boost to those bats. And if Sanchez kind of remotes back to his 2015 self, although he looked great in his debut here in 2016, those Yankees bats could pay off. But over-under, there is an over-under of 8. So I think there will be some runs scored, but I think you got to be kind of picky with who gets. It's not going to be a full-on blowout from one team. But if there is, I would expect it to come from the Yankees side. Next game, you got Boston home taking on Baltimore, who is still undefeated, 6-0. Over under a 9, Boston's favorites, 154 there. Loving the offense in this game here. You're looking at Mike Wright. I'm looking to definitely pick on him. Small sample size, a lot of 361 WOBA to right-handers last season. 30% hard ball rate, doesn't miss any bats, 1.93 home runs per 9. Boston going to be one of the more stackable teams tonight. I like them a lot. And even lefties. I mean, lefties, he allowed a 392 WOBA, so you can really fire them up in all formats, these Boston teams 1 through 6. You're looking at Betts, Pedroia, and play Bogarts. Kind of a nice pivot off of the Coors game. I think this is my next step down from that game as far as offense goes. I think there's going to be a decent amount on both sides, more so on the Boston side. Obviously, Buchholz, not a great pitcher, kind of an average arm, but who can get the job done at times. Kind of worth a look tonight. I mentioned him a little bit on the pitcher pod, as I do with all these pitchers, so I'm mostly focusing on offense here, but Buchholz kind of an interesting pivot play from some of the top arms tonight. Baltimore does have some strikeout-worthy batters. If Buchholz can find his stuff and he can get that fastball changeup working, he can be pretty solid. So, but as far as that, I think Chris Davis, Manny Machado entering in is popular plays tonight. Machado, I definitely don't mind in cash games. Davis, more of a GPP play for me. Davis, that FanDuel price, not too shabby, sitting there at 3,800. But, he is a pivot off of Ortiz. He is a pivot off of Brandon Belt, who's in Coors. So Davis should be a little bit lower owned tonight than what he's been, over the first week and a half of the season so far. So keep an interesting eye on that. Next game, not a ton of offense going to be predicted here. Over under a 6, Jose Fernandez, Noah Syndergaard. Love this game for pitchers. Friendly ballpark in Citi Field. Got some cooler weather there. Both subpar offenses. And Syndergaard, kind of my preferred play on the day. I think Fernandez, you can pivot off of if you're looking to be a little bit different. I expect both to be fairly moderately owned. In both in great spots. I do go into deeper detail on them on the pitcher pod. Both of my favorite, but Syndergaard, kind of my top option on the slate tonight. So, as with both those names, I don't expect a ton of offense there. Moving on to 7-10, Corey Kluber, Matt Moore. Not picking on Kluber with any raised bats, but look at the Indians side of things. It is interesting. Obviously, they got Tropicana against them, which is a little disappointing. Matt Moore really struggled last year. Did all right in the spring, but I don't take too much stock in the spring. He allowed a 375 WOBA to right-handed bats last year, just a 40% ground ball rate, 25% line drive rate. So that kind of puts guys like Marlon Burr, Carlos Santana, Rajay Davis kind of in play for me. Francisco Lindor as well. It's not a great park, which is disappointing. Not going to get a ton of pop, but looking at some of their prices, it's not a bad option. You got Rajay Davis, 3,300 on DK. Not bad for a punt outfielder. There's a couple leadoff men that are fairly cheap, but I think Michael Taylor kind of steals the show. Davis, 2,700 there on FanDuel. Marlon Burr, interesting because he's got the power. He has hammered lefties over the last few seasons. Does have big ISO numbers against Southpaws, so I'll definitely look at him in GPPs. I think this is a game where you can get a little bit different with a few of those Cleveland bats. 8-10, Royals and Astros, Chris Medlin, Mike Fiers. It's an interesting one because these are two pitchers that can hold teams at bay, although you can also see these two offenses kind of exploding. As far as left-handed bats go, Mike Fiers has been pretty solid against them. Chris Medlin allowed a 323 WOBA in limited time last year. Not a big strikeout guy. I think you're looking at a 35% hard ball rate. That kind of looks like you can take another shot at Jason Castro, um, at Luis Valbuena, Colby Rasmus. Those are all great GPP plays that we've seen kind of go off. Valbuena and Castro are more your dirt cheap value guys. Rasmus was a little more priced up a little bit. So as far as right-handed bats go, Mike Fiers allowed 325 WOBA last season. He can miss some bats. He also did struggle with a long ball, 1.33 home run per nine. Kind of makes like guys like Lorenzo Cain interesting tonight as far as swerves go. Medlin, a little bit tougher on right-handers. Guys like Springer, Altuve, and Correa there kind of take a little back seat for me on tonight's slate. But still, those bats are always in play. I think you can definitely take some one-ups. I like Hosmer here. I think Cain's an interesting play. As far as that goes from the Royal side, not much. Moustakas, another one if you're looking to be different. So over-under of 8. It's a friendly park and Minute Maid. I think there's definitely some kind of value and top plays that can differentiate yourself from tonight's slate. So 840 Giants and Giants and Rockies. Over under of 11. Let's jump into this. Jeff Samardzija, Tyler Chatwood, and let's take a look at Jeff Samardzija first. A little bit tougher on right-handers last year, but still struggled. Did allow a 302 WOBA. Was all right for the most part. Lower ground ball rate than you'd like, but did keep the ball in the yard. That's tough to do here at Coors. As far as lefties goes, that's where they hammered Jeff Samardzija. Allowed a 357 WOBA. 33% hard ball rate. Ground ball rate was poor. 1.77 home runs per nine. Carlos Gonzalez, Charlie Blackmon, Gerardo Parra, guys that are on my radar tonight against him. Yes, they're pricey, but there is some value on the slate of pitching, which I'll just plug myself in. Head on over to that pitcher pod. I do talk some value that can help get into those Coors players. Mostly Kendall Graven, Hector Santiago, are names to keep an eye on. So, and there's a third one that slipped my mind, but it'll come to me later in the show. Samardzija, he's a guy I'm looking to really target lefties against. As far as Tyler Chatwood goes, really this guy has struggled most of his career. He struggled against left-handers, against right-handers. So you can really jump 1 through 6 with this Giants team, and they're a team really you can go 1 through 9 with, and maybe go a bottom half stack with guys like Angel Pagan. Started off with Belt, Pence, Crawford. I mean, those are guys where you could do a little wraparound even. I think there's going to be a ton of runs scored from this Giants team. They've done well at Coors in the past, but obviously you're looking up front at Span, Belt, Pence, Posey, Panic there. So there's something for everyone, and they are priced extremely high. You're looking at Pence 5,100, Span 4,700, Crawford 4,200. It's not a bad price for him. So there are other options go. Matt Duffy 4,400 is not bad. Panic 43. So it's not extremely priced up high. I think Posey's the highest there at 4,800, and Belt's 4,700. So they aren't up in that 5K range, which is nice. So it gives you a little bit of leeway. You can definitely do some things to your lineup, but definitely get those bats in there, work around them. I know it's going to be intriguing to pay up at pitcher tonight, which is something. You got a Coors game and you got some electric arms like Syndergaard, Kluber, and Fernandez there. So it's going to be interesting to see what lineups kind of come out with, more so in GPPs tonight. So it should be a fun one. 10:05, you're looking at Hector Santiago, Kendall Graveman. Over under 7.5. These offenses are pretty poor on both sides. There are some intriguing plays. Mike Trout, always in play, finally got that first homer off the board last night. I mean, if any sort of offense is going to come from Mike Trout in this Angels lineup, I mean, they finally put some runs up on the board last night, but overall they've been atrocious. I didn't expect much out of them for most of this year. So Trout is your most expensive outfielder on DK. Kind of interesting just because you got the Coors slate, just because he hasn't been producing a great amount. But 4,600 on FanDuel there. He is priced below Blackmon, Gonzalez, Stanton, Harper, and Bautista. So you kind of got a little bit of a discount there. I'm not looking to pick on Graveman, not because he's good, not because he's bad either, but just because that Angels lineup on a full slate is not too appealing. So Hector Santiago, on the other hand, I do like him. I think he's an interesting play tonight as far as a pitcher goes. As far as picking on him with hitters, Chris Davis kind of pops into mind as a guy who can go off against him just because Santiago gave up a ton of homers to right-handed bats last season, a lot of 323 WOBA, and a 1.72 home run per nine. He doesn't miss a ton of bats. The thing's going up against O.Co for Davis there. It's a pretty decent, pitcher's park. You're obviously looking at Davis being a high strikeout guy, so completely boomer bust. But if you are looking for some value power, that's not a leadoff guy that I've mentioned already. Davis is certainly in play for me. And that's about it from this game. I don't expect there to be a ton of runs scored. Same goes for this next one, although there are a couple lefty mashers to look at. So, and that's Rangers Mariners, two lefties on the hill, Derek Holland and Wade Miley, 7.5 total. Obviously, Nelson Cruz comes into play as an interesting guy to kind of pivot off of some of those big name outfielders. Had a solid night last night, but Holland, a lot of 360 WOBA to right-handers in limited time last year. Not a big strikeout guy, 1.85 home run per nine, 38% hard ball rate in that span. That's certainly interesting for me to target. A guy like Chris Iannetta, who's a punt catcher to look at tonight. Iannetta solid numbers against Southpaws and Cruz as well. So those are there. Franklin Gutierrez, he's kind of your poor man's Nelson Cruz. He's crushed lefties over the last few seasons. He's a guy who is going to get pinch hit for, which is disappointing. So he could only see 2 at-bats possibly if Seattle doesn't get anything going. But 3,000 on DK, if he hits a homer, I mean, you're sitting pretty there. So he does have, quite a bit of value, quite a bit of upside for that price, 2,300 on FanDuel. Interesting play, but as I mentioned, he could get pinch hit for late in the game. And that kind of goes with all these platoon guys that Seattle has. So keep an eye on that. As far as the Rangers side goes, you can look at Adrian Beltre. He's kind of the one that's crushed right-handed or left-handed pitching throughout his career. But however, he is priced around some other names that I definitely prefer. Guys like Daniel Murphy, guys like Tyler White, Manny Machado. I mean, all those names, of course, guys. So unfortunately, he's priced around too many guys to put him on a radar for me, but he does have a nice matchup. They're just better guys and better ballparks to really target tonight. So as far as that goes, I mean, really, let's head back down that list. I mean, you can look at some of the Nationals bats, but really that Red Sox-Orioles game is really where you want to target. Also, look at the Indians to be contrarian. You can look at the Royals-Astros to be contrarian. I think really the 2 games I want to focus on are Giants and Rockies and Red Sox and Orioles. And then also kind of the Yankees as a contrarian stack if Sanchez can revert back to his old self there. So that's going to wrap it up here with the slate breakdown. Should be a fun one. We got tons of content going out on the site, bullpen breakdowns, calling our shots. Nick is doing Quest for Dongs. Our cash game breakdown cheat sheets are all up. So definitely head over to our site and check out all of our great content.